When she neared the middle of the river, she looked over her shoulder. He was not following her tracks. He went straight across the ice, running the shortest distance to reach her. He was close then. His face was twisted and scarlet from the exertion and the cold. There was satisfaction in his eyes. He was sure he could outrun her. She was familiar with the river. Down to the instant ice flexed into hairline fractures, and the cracking bone sliver sounds gathered momentum with the opening ice until the churning gray water was set free. She stopped and turned to the sound of the river and the rattle of swirling ice fragments where he fell through. She pulled off a mitten and zipped the parka to her throat. She was conscious then of her own rapid breathing. She moved slowly, kicking the ice ahead with the heel of her boot, feeling for sinews of ice to hold her. She looked ahead and all around herself. In the twilight, the dense white sky had merged into the flat snow-covered tundra. In the frantic running, she had lost her place on the river. She stood still. The east bank of the river was lost in the sky. The boundaries had been swallowed by the freezing white. But then, in the distance, she saw something red, and suddenly it was as she had remembered it all those years. She sat on her bed, and while she waited, she listened to the old man. The hunter had found a small jagged knoll on the ice. He pulled his beaver fur cap off his head. The fur inside it steamed with his body heat and sweat. He left it upside down on the ice for the great bear to stalk, and he waited downwind on top of the ice knoll. He was holding the jade knife. She thought she could see the end of his story, the way he wheezed out the words, but still he reached into his cache of dry fish and dribbled water into his mouth from the tin cup. All night she listened to him describe each breath the man took, each motion of the bear's head as it tried to catch the sound of the man's breathing and tested the wind for his scent. The state trooper asked her questions, and the woman who cleaned the house for the priest translated them into Yupik. They wanted to know what had happened to the storeman, the Gusuk, who had been seen running after her down the road onto the river last evening. He had not come back, and the Gusuk boss in Anchorage was concerned about him. She did not answer for a long time, because the old man suddenly sat up in his bed and began to talk excitedly, looking at all of them, the trooper in his dark glasses and the housekeeper in her corduroy parka. He kept saying, the story, the great bear, the hunter. They asked her again what happened to the man from the Northern Commercial Store. He lied to them. He told them it was safe to drink. But I will not lie. She stood up and put on the gray wolfskin parka. She said, but I don't lie. The attorney came back again, and the jailer slid open the steel doors and opened the cell to let him in. He motioned for the jailer to stay to translate for him. She laughed when she saw how the jailer would be forced by this Gusuk to speak Yupik to her. She liked the Gusuk attorney for that, for the thinning hair on his head. He was very tall, and she liked to think about the exposure of his head to the freezing. She wondered if he would feel the ice descending from the sky before the others did. He wanted to know why she had told the state trooper she had killed the storeman. Some village children had seen it happen, he said, and it was an accident. That's all you have to say to the judge. It was an accident. He kept repeating it over and over again to her, slowly, in a loud but gentle voice. It was an accident. He was running after you and he fell through the ice. That's all you have to say. That's all. And they will let you go home, back to your village. The jailer translated the words sullenly, staring down at the floor. She shook her head. I will not change this story, not even to escape this place and go home. I intended that he die. The story must be told as it is. The attorney exhaled loudly. His eyes looked tired. Tell her that she could not have killed him that way. He was a white man. He ran after her without a parka or mittens. She could not have planned that. He paused and turned toward the cell door. Tell her I will do all I can for her. I will explain to the judge that her mind is confused. She laughed out loud when the jailer translated what the attorney said. The Gussicks did not understand the story. They could not see the way it must be told, year after year, as the old man had done, without lapse or silence. She looked out the window at the frozen white sky. The sun had finally broken loose from the ice, but it moved like a wounded caribou, running on strength which only dying animals find, leaping and running on bullet-shattered lungs. Its light was weak and pale. It pushed dimly through the clouds. She turned and faced the Gussick attorney. It began a long time ago, she intoned steadily. In the summertime, early in the morning, I remember something red in the tall river grass. The day after the old man died, men from the village came. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, across from the woman the trooper had hired to watch her. They came into the room slowly and listened to her. At the foot of her bed, they left a king salmon that had been slit open wide and dried last summer. But she did not pause or hesitate. She went on with the story, and she never stopped. Not even when the woman got up to close the door behind the village men. The old man would not change the story, even when he knew the end was approaching. Lies could not stop what was coming. He thrashed around on the bed, pulling the blankets loose, knocking bundles of dried fish and meat on the floor. The hunter had been on the ice for many hours. The freezing winds on the ice knoll had numbed his hands in the mittens, and the cold had exhausted him. He felt a single muscle tremor in his hand that he could not stop, and the jade knife fell. It shattered on the ice, and the blue glacier bear turned slowly to face him.